Perfect. So we want to remind you that you can follow us on social media at Crossroads Fund on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. If you're not already connected to us, we will share a little bit more about who Crossroads Fund is in a moment. My name is Emmanuel Garcia. I'm the Development and Communications Manager at Crossroads Fund. Today, you'll hear from Crossroads Fund staff who will share lessons learned and some best practices taken from our virtual week-long celebration fundraiser. So I'll have them introduce themselves now.
Hello, everyone. I am Cristina Roque. I am the Operations Manager at the Crossroads Fund. I don't know, anything else we're going to say about ourselves? Go ahead, Katie.
Hi, my name is Katie Madden. I'm the Administrative Assistant at the Crossroads Fund and also in charge of the silent auction for the event.
Hi, I'm Ed. I'm the Communications and Finance Associate at Crossroads.
Cool, thank you. A quick introduction about Crossroads Fund. We are a public foundation in Chicago that supports grassroots groups working on issues of racial, social, and economic justice. In fiscal year 2019, we granted nearly $820,000 to 101 powerful organizations, many of which are in this room today. We do this with the annual support of over 1,000 donors. Our fundraising efforts include our annual benefit, which make our work to support Chicago's most innovative and visionary organizing and activism possible. In 2021, it'll be our 40th anniversary year. So something to celebrate looking forward. We wanted to share that in mid-March, Crossroads Fund had to pivot from hosting our annual benefit, Seeds of Change, which was scheduled to take place on Friday, March 27, to a virtual week-long celebration we called Virtual Seeds. Things that you should note about our annual fundraiser are that generally our goal is to raise between $100,000 to $150,000 gross. The event typically costs between $40,000 to $45,000. This year, unfortunately, due to COVID-19, we were able to save money, such as food and venue. However, we still made a commitment to pay all of our vendors. This included our photographer and our DJ. And we'll talk a little bit about what that commitment looked like. By the time we had decided that we were going to pivot from an in-person event to a virtual fundraiser, we had already raised about 60% of our fundraising goal, about $90,000. We did this through sponsorships, advertising, and ticket purchases leading up to the event. So a question you can ask yourself is, what do you want to do for, what do you normally do in your fundraiser that you can modify virtually? So what is something that you're already planning to do, that you already plan to do, that you can repurpose? For us, some examples of this were every year at our annual benefit, we have a program book. So our executive director writes an introduction letter, a welcome letter to the event. We use that welcome letter as the introductory email to our virtual celebration. We have a DJ at our event. So our DJ, instead of an in-person, a live DJ, he did a live DJ set, and he already had the capacity to do that. And we have 3 awardees that we hosted online as Facebook watch parties. So we had already identified who these awardees were going to be, and this is how we honored their work. Some other things that we did were we had a resilient community playlist, which we crowdsourced from folks, and we one of our host committee members hosted a virtual happy hour for the host committee to kind of kick things off. I want to talk a little bit about planning. Whether your annual fundraising event brings together 50 or 500 people, the planning of any event, virtual or not, typically takes 6 months. By the time we had to pivot, we were about 2 to 3 weeks out from our event. I say this because, like all fundraising events or campaigns, it still requires planning. So looking at that, however, in this moment that we're in, it was important to revisit our goals. For us, it was thinking through if we were still going to aim to raise $150,000. We decided to go for it, but also knew that it may not happen, and that was absolutely okay. The goal of our annual event isn't just monetary, it brings our community together and celebrates 3 awardees. So that was absolutely a huge part of our motivation to host our fundraiser, to honor that work. The type of event, we decided that we wanted to give ourselves some time to raise the funds, so we spread out the events over the span of a week. This would also give people time to bid on silent auction items and donate. A week is a lot though. I know the staff agrees that if we were going to do it again, we would shorten the time frame. Maybe it's a weekend for you, or maybe it's a one-day event. Communicating with our supporters was very, very important. We wanted them to hear it from us first that we were going virtual. For example, for our sponsors and advertisers, we shared just how important their support meant, especially in this moment. By going virtual, it created new ways to acknowledge our sponsors and advertisers. We featured them on our website and emails and social media. While there are things you won't have to do, such as cook food or staff an event, you still need to come up with an internal game plan for staff. Our fundraising team consisted of 5 people primarily, but all the staff, 7 total, supported in some way. So determining your own capacity of your work is important. Virtual also means that it required more video, graphic design, and website management support. So I want to turn it over to Cristina Roque.
Thank you. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about what Manny was just talking about in regards to staff support and the other kinds of support that are really important for the event, in person or otherwise. So what typically happens with Seeds of Change is we have a host committee, and we, like Manny said, we were about 2 weeks out, before it was time for the event. And so we had done a lot of the work that we usually do in the typical ways that we do it. So definitely we had the staff support. That's very important. Make sure the staff is supportive of all of the things that are happening. Our board members are amazing, and they were totally ready for whatever we were going to plan. And another large group that we have is our host committee. And so we usually have, maybe a group of 60 people on our host committee. So since it's a spring event, what we usually do is have a host committee party in February. That had already happened, and they had all come together at our host committee party. We had our paper invites, our beautiful paper invites that they wrote lovely notes on to everyone to come join us and celebrate at this new space that we were so excited about. So all of that happened in February. And so a month later is when we realized we weren't going to be able to have this, event in person. And so the staff had to quickly come together and come up with a plan of what it was going to look like then. We talked it over, came up with the best plan we knew of, and then decided to have basically what we're doing now, a pre Seeds of Change party, where we then shared all of the things that we were planning. It was a lot of work for our communications team, creating all of the visuals and coming up with what the virtual week was going to look like, as well as if you all have attended Seeds of Change, you know that we still use pen and paper for our silent auction. So we quickly had to move to an online auction format, which we had not done before. So that was completely new. So that was a whole new unexpected set of tasks that we needed to do. So all of that got communicated at this virtual pre-party, so that staff, board members, host committee members, everyone was on the same page. Everyone knew what to expect and knew what was expected of them, as far as sharing graphics, sharing videos, creating excitement, knowing what hashtags to use, knowing, just what to expect so that they could do their best job to help promote and, really get folks talking about our event and ultimately to give. I think the only other thing I want to make sure to touch on is that because we were 2 weeks out of the event, we really had done a lot of the work. A lot of the work is done before the event. I would say maybe about 80%. The majority of what we raise for the event is raised ahead of time through ticket sales, sponsorships, all of those things. And so we felt like we were in pretty good shape leading up to it because we were on target. Our only question, I think, was what was going to happen, on the day of, on the week of, at the very end of it, because we weren't sure. We didn't know what was going to happen. But I would say, make sure to have all the pieces in place before the event. Do as much fundraising and outreach that you can before it, because that's the way it usually works, for us anyway. Just the majority of the work is done beforehand, and then the event is just sort of like, the icing on the cake, to finish off the event. And so what we're in May now, and this was sort of, it was planned for March 27th was the original date. Other helpful tip or other Crossroads tip from me to you is remember the pledges. If anyone says I will give, I have one outstanding pledge that I'm still following up on that I keep hearing we're going to get. So make sure you keep track of all those things and definitely do follow up, because that's all money that was pledged to you. So once we get this pledge, we're going to be a few $100s away from reaching our $150,000 goal. So make sure to follow up with folks. If they said they would do something, follow up with them. So I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Christina.
Hi, so I'm here to talk about the silent auction. As Christina said, we had in the past always done just the, old-fashioned pen and paper auctions at our event. We never had mobile bidding or anything like that. So switching to an online auction entirely was kind of a big deal because we had never done that before. And we didn't have a super long time to figure all of this out. So the first step for me was to research a couple of the auction platforms. There's a lot of them out there. You know, I had kind of gotten a few tips from people on, you know, on Facebook of things they had used. The two that I had researched were Bidding for Good and One Cause. And they were both actually seemed like they were really good. And I think we would have been happy with either of them. We ended up going with Bidding for Good because they actually offered the option of sort of buying things a la carte. So One Cause, a lot of these companies, they offer not only auction help, but like help with buying tickets and help with fundraising and, you know, database management. And we didn't need any of that stuff. And for One Cause, you had to pay like a fee for everything. And Bidding for Good allowed us to just, you know, purchase the auction package, and that just was all we needed. So that worked the best for us. So that's why we ended up going with Bidding for Good. And I was really happy with them. They were reasonably priced, and they were very easy to use. Once we chose the platform, I kind of had to get really up to speed fast on how to use it. And I did find that Bidding for Good was pretty easy to use. They offer a lot of tutorials. They had a few like video walkthroughs that I could have scheduled, which I actually didn't really even have time to do because we really needed to get moving. But there were tutorials available. They really walk you through things really well. The few times I did have trouble finding answers to things, I was able to really easily contact somebody at Bidding for Good, and they were able to help me. So, you know, I thought it was a very intuitive system to use. You know, it was definitely time consuming to put up all of the items. We had like 190 auction items, which is a lot. Thankfully, you know, our staff was able to help me take pictures and, you know, do some research and put things up. But once you get the hang of it, it's not bad. But definitely, if you have a lot of items, it can be time consuming. So give yourself time to, you know, set up the site and get everything together. As far as people using the site, we didn't really have any, you know, major questions or complaints from our bidders about the site. It seemed like everybody was able to relatively easily figure out how to use it. They offer really simple instructions. I like to joke that the only person that actually asked me a question about it was my mom, and she was able to figure out her question pretty easily. So everybody seemed to, you know, have luck using it. It worked really well. They offer, they send out emails automatically once you bid on something. So they really do a good job of keeping the bidder informed. So like once you bid on something, you'll get an email saying that you bid. Once you've been outbid, you'll get an email. You'll even get emails, you know, if you look at an item and didn't bid on it, or maybe bid on it and, you know, then kind of forgot about it, it'll sort of remind you, especially as it gets toward the end of the auction, like, hey, are you still interested in X? So it was really good. Regarding auction items themselves, because we were so far into the process, we had probably like 90% of our items already in hand by the time that I had to do this. There are Bidding for Good and other auction platforms do offer help and assistance in procuring auction items. I didn't need to use that at all, so I didn't really do any research into it, but that is something that they offer. You know, we had everything already pretty much. What I would say as far as, you know, showcasing the items on the auction, you know, I found it a lot different because usually at the auction you get to actually see the item and pick it up, and you kind of know the size. And I realized as I started to enter things that I had no idea like how big any of this stuff was. And I actually had to have Christina, who was in the office one day, like measure all of the artwork so I could tell people like how big things were. So just make sure that you have, really detailed descriptions of the items. Make them sound fun, make them sound exciting. Our intern Alexis was able to take some really fantastic pictures of the items to use on the website. So that was helpful. I also incorporated, some stock photos from different businesses if it was a restaurant, along with their logo. So just make the items look as enticing as possible, with good descriptions and pictures so that people want to bid. Another thing I would suggest when you are entering descriptions is you need to kind of decide who the auction is going to be open to and how you're going to get the items to people. A lot of the platforms, including Bidding for Good, have an option where you can open up the auction to their larger bidding community, which is basically like people all over the country. We decided not to do that. Partly, I think, because I wanted our community to be able to participate in the auction fully and win things, but also because we didn't want to have to pay to ship things all over the place. So keep that in mind. And even with local people, we basically decided that we were just going to mail out the gift certificates, and any other items that people won that were actually physical items, we would have at our office available for them to pick up once the stay-at-home mandate is finished. So we said that up front, in the auction description, so everybody knew that. Everybody's been totally cool with that. So just make sure that how you're going to get things to people and communicate that early on. Another thing that really helped us was promoting our auction on social media. Our website, Crossroads Fund, our Facebook page, Instagram, we posted items and information about items for people to kind of just get excited about the auction. I shared that information on my personal page, as did a lot of our staff and volunteers. Just getting information out there about the auction and the items you have is really helpful. As we got close to the end and there were things that didn't have bids, we put out posts about those things, just like, hey, this doesn't have any bids. This is a great time to take advantage of, getting this item. So I think that all really helped. I think with our 190 items, we ended up having only 5 that didn't get any bids. So just really talking it up on social media, sharing it as much as possible is really helpful. The last thing I will say is just to make sure that you're ready for post-auction activities. I got so wrapped up in the auction that I didn't realize that I needed to sort of draft an email to send to everybody who won on auction items until the auction was over. So Bidding for Good did automatically send out a notice to people who won, but it was helpful to sort of send out something specifically from me with a little more information. So just kind of make sure you read up on the post-auction things. There will be steps that need to be taken, to run everybody's credit card, to process them. It doesn't just happen automatically. So just be ready for all that. And like I said, it's important just to let people know in advance, how you'll get the auction items to them, because, normally we have this at an actual event and people just carry the auction item home with them. That's not possible now. So you just sort of need to make arrangements. And that's it. I was really happy with the success of our auction. It worked out really well, and I'm happy to take questions when this is over. Thanks.
Thanks, Katie. Going to talk a little bit about communications and the communications for the event. I think a lot of the points that I have are probably going to be obvious, but I think good things to highlight as you think about doing an online event. As has been said, when we made the pivot, the success of the event switched to being really focused on communications and having strong communications to make sure people were able to engage with it. So just a few reflections from that. So when we decided to pivot, we met as a staff and we mapped out what the entire week would look like, and all the different events that were going to be happening throughout the week. And we switched it from a live in-person event to a digital event. But I think in terms of communications, what that meant practically is that we created a week-long event that often, or that in many ways resembled more of a campaign, because we had many events within this one larger event. So what that meant communications-wise was that we had to be very intentional about outlining all of the different ways in which we were going to communicate to folks, how we were going to engage our audience, and make sure that they were going to be able to participate. So in a lot of ways, it just wasn't a single event, but it was multiple events throughout the course of a week, which for me resembles more of a campaign. The next point that I think, again, this is obvious, but in making a pivot like we did, or doing any event, even if you're not pivoting, the thing that, I would really emphasize is to, once you have the event outlined, to have your communications team get together and to plan, map, and prepare everything. So what that meant for us was, once we outlined as a staff the full week, the communications team all sat down together and we started to think about each event that we were going to be doing. And we started to put together all of the communications pieces we needed for each, what platform, what media collateral, every piece that was going to be a part of each opportunity for engagement, each event, so that we had it all written out, we had it all mapped out, and then we could begin to prepare it. This was the best way for us to navigate a very quick pivot, as well as having the map in place enabled us to then do the creation of all the different media that we needed, the collateral that we needed, while working from home, sheltering in place. So be very clear about creating and mapping everything out. The other important thing about mapping everything out prior to the event was that then during the event, we were able to engage on our social media. If we needed to pivot quickly with or create new content, or as Katie just alluded to, doing some promotion of the silent auction items that weren't bid on, that kind of thing. Having everything prepped and ready to go made it possible for us to be more intentional during the week as we were engaging our audience. Third point, internal communication is key, especially when you're sheltering in place, working from home. So needing to over communicate in a lot of ways internally, and be very clear about who is doing what, when, and what our processes looked like. For us, what that looked like is that we had a Google spreadsheet where we put this map of the week's events with all the collateral and media and content and copy. Everything was tied to that. And we had a process within that for creating all the media, for example, all the different graphics we needed and the videos we needed. So we had we had all of the content outlined, and then we said who was going to create the initial draft, who was going to edit that draft, who was going to approve that draft, to make sure that the final copy was ready to go. We had a color coding system for when a draft was ready, when that draft had been reviewed, and then when it was approved. And then we also assigned people to who was actually going to be releasing that content on our social media, what time of the day, all of that. So it was very clear, and everyone, the folks that were part of the communications team, knew what they were doing, who was doing what, and kind of the timeline that we had to create it all so that we could be ready for the week-long event. So being very clear about internal communication. Like I said, we did it with a Google spreadsheet, a lot of email, Google Hangouts, Zoom meetings. Other folks may like Slack, whatever works well for your team and how you want to communicate, but just being very intentional about how you communicate with each other, so you don't leave anything for any room for error in that respect. Fourth point, this should be obvious, but try to make your event fun. Be creative with your engagement. When you switch from an in-person event to a digital event, you lose obviously one of the most fun aspects of it, and just being able to socialize, be with people you love and care about. So we had to think very intentionally about how we recreated the joy that Seeds of Change tries to have every year. So as Manny talked about, we tried to recreate some of those elements. So we had the live DJ set, we had the community playlist, we had a happy hour. We also invited some of our donors and other folks to create videos that we shared on our social media. We tried a lot of different things. We did Facebook watch parties for the awardees, where we watched the actual videos that were created to honor the awardees. So there were different things that we tried. Because of how quickly we had to pivot for this event, this is probably something that we could have done a much better job of, because we didn't. We had to create so much content very quickly that we didn't focus as much on the engagement as we would have liked. But we could have done Instagram takeovers, more Instagram stories, different things like that. But be creative with your engagement. If there's something that a lot of folks right now are doing different events online, of course, and feel free to copy things that you like, things that you see people are doing that you think are fun and exciting. Don't hesitate. That's the best way to make things fun. And then last thing, make it accessible. Crossroads Fund has a pretty wide range of folks who have different experience, understanding of technology. So in order to be able to engage everyone in our audience around all these different mini events that happen throughout the week, we had to be very clear about it within our communication as to how people were to engage with us and to connect with us. So email, social media, obviously a lot of hashtags, very consistent with the hashtags. We use Bitly's, easy URLs for people to copy and use to go to the pages that they need to go to. We stored sort of a lot of it and made our website the home base for a lot of the content, because we knew that is a place that people can access and their experience with it. So for example, with live DJ stream, the DJ hosted his stream on a platform called Twitch, which we knew would be new to a lot of our audience. So rather than send people to Twitch, potentially get lost along the way, we decided to embed that video within our website so that people could just go to our website and check all that out, rather than have to navigate another platform that they may not be familiar with. So be very clear and accessible with your language, because it's, in terms of taking an in-person event to a digital event. In person, you can take people from room to room. You can guide them with volunteers. You can use signage, that kind of thing. We had to be sure that with our communication, we were able to sort of do that, to guide people from event to event, to make sure that they were there when they needed to be and ready for the events, the different mini events that we had all week. So that's more this very quick summary of thinking about some of the quick points on our communications. If anybody has any questions, obviously feel free to reach out. Happy to be helpful with whatever events you may be planning.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Christina, and thank you, Katie. We're going to move to the Q&A portion of today's webinar. We do have 2 questions, and I want to see if Katie, Christina, or Ed want to take these. Yeah, so the first question, and feel free to drop them in. I can't see them, so Christina, after that, will be able to share them. But there's a question about the host committee and who they are.
Yeah, I can talk about that, and if you all want to add anything to that. So Crossroads, we are, coming up on our 40th anniversary. So we have a lot of folks who have been with Crossroads from the very beginning, 40 years ago. And so we have a lot of friends of Crossroads who we always turn to, who we know would want to be on the host committee. And so there are various ways that we come up with a list that we use to invite folks to be on the host committee. So one of the ways that we start with is, were you on the host committee last year? And if you were, then you get put on the list. We're going to ask you again if you did it last year or the year before, the year before. So that's one. Another way that we do it is most recently we started doing giving projects, and these folks are it's a group of people that's very committed to fundraising and Crossroads. And so after they do the giving project, we'll ask them if they want to continue with their relationship with Crossroads and do other things, including being on the host committee. So we'll add them as well. We also start doing, once we sort of have the plan for the event on who our awardees are going to be, we think about who the awardees are and who would be, good people to ask to be on the host committee. If this year we honored Raise Your Hand, so we sort of think about of our friends that we know are donors to Crossroads, is there anyone we can think of that would be excited about honoring Raise Your Hand? And so we start adding names that way. We also just sometimes look at who has attended our event for the last 3 to 5 years that has consistently been showing up to Seeds of Change. Obviously, they enjoy the event, and then we'll ask them, we'll kind of say, like, you come every year, do you want to be on the host committee? So there's lots of different ways in which we start compiling the list of who we want to ask. So we do ask over 100 people to be on the host committee, knowing that not everyone will be able to commit. So then we'll start hearing back from them, and we'll start listing them as members on the host committee. And so when we ask them to be on the host committee, we do ask them to make a commitment of a couple of things. We ask them that they buy tickets or sponsorship to the event. So that's one. We also ask them to submit, we want them to invite their friends, and, we have a lot of mutual friends, but we also try to, ask them to think about people who may not know about Crossroads or may not have been to Seeds of Change, to sort of grow our list in that way and get new people to sort of learn about the work that we're doing. So we ask them to submit a list of, people who they're going to invite, names, emails, addresses, whatever information they have. And we track that information, because what we do, which I think is really helpful, is we send out host committee updates. And so if you commit to being on the host committee, you'll start getting these updates, and we'll say, this is a list of folks and organizations and different all of the gifts that have been made to the benefit, whether it's a ticket sale, a silent auction donation, an ad. And so if we're asking you to follow up with, all of your people, you can refer to this list and say, oh, look, my friend has already done something. I need to follow up with, these friends because they're not on the list. So it's helpful in follow-up for the host committee. That's the other thing I didn't talk about. We asked them to also help us sell ads and, get us some fun auction items. So that's the commitment from the host committee. We also, when we have the in-person events, have ribbons on their name tags, because, we want them to really feel like this is their party. They are hosting this party. They are the hosts. And so we want them to talk to all the guests and, just whatever, a host would normally do. It's not just our event. It's not the staff's event. It's, the community's event. And we want everyone to feel like they are, hosting this party, and do whatever we can to make them feel that that's the case. So we try our best to do that. I don't know if there's anything else that I missed with the host committee. I mentioned earlier when I was speaking that we asked them to come to a host committee party where we have the paper invites, and they come with their list so they can write personalized notes on their invitations to all of their friends, and we send those out that way. So that's like the first thing we ask them to do, and then we ask them to do follow-up with emails and that sort of thing. So, and when we did the virtual event this year, one thing that we asked our board and host committee to do is to make videos, which turned out to be like so sweet. It was really touching because there wasn't a script or anything like that for them. We were just like, just get on social media and talk about Crossroads or talk about Seeds of Change and why it's important. And so we got some really sweet videos from our board and host committee that they shared with the hashtag. So we were all able to see them and just talking about why they're on the host committee and why this is important. So that was really sweet for us to see, like them just speaking from the heart. And so that was a new host committee, commitment that we asked of them to sort of, get on social media and just talk about us and the work we do. So.
Thank you, Christina. The only other question I caught, do you mind just checking if there are other questions, Christina? But the only one that I caught before was the Facebook ads, or did we use Facebook ads or any advertising online, social media to boost any of the posts? Maybe Ed, you can take that one.
Sure, we did not. We relied heavily on our host committee, our board, our grantees, just the wider community that we have to spread the word. Definitely tied to our communication strategy with making it easy for folks to participate with us in the pivot. I'm a little bit against Facebook in terms of their surveillance and their extraction. So not giving them any more profit is a goal of mine, but it's definitely a good strategy for other groups to use. But I wouldn't necessarily know in terms of recommendation on the amount to spend either.
Cool.
So the other thing we have here is our friend Sarah Best, who we always say Sarah Best is the best because she is, posted about a blog. And Ed, this is about, I don't know if you all can talk about this. So when we talked about earlier, using your staff and board and host committee members that are very savvy around social media and technology, that is not me. So embedding, social media posts and the Twitch thing and all that stuff, I have no idea what Ed is talking about, but Sarah Best wrote about it. And she also, says you can see examples of it in the blog post that she has posted there. Mm-hmm. So, hi, Sarah.
Are there other questions?
There are. So, what are some reasons that you said you would want to shorten the events? That's question one from Mariana.
I think some of the reasons are and feel free to jump in if anyone wants to add, is that it is a lot of work to do 7 days. It was 7 days of events. Every day, there's a responsibility, there's heavy on communication. So I think that week, I know that all of us put in a lot of time and energy all day, because the social media posts don't stop. You don't stop, sharing or people responding or interacting with people on social media was important. And if they're interacting with you all the time, at all hours of the day, there's always someone who's monitoring that. And so that's why I would say that it is a heavy lift. And also with the graphic work, you're essentially creating more content for yourself to produce. So if there's a way that you can shorten that, I would recommend doing that. But it's really just about that we came up with 7 days. It could have been 5, and that would have been fine. Yeah. Any other questions?
So Pamela is asking, will you keep some of the elements online moving forward? So I think Katie, do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I definitely think that we are done with our paper and pen auction bidding days. So yeah, I mean, next year, hopefully we can go back to having an actual event. And I think we'll do the auction, definitely have mobile bidding at the event, which will hopefully also open it up to people who can't attend the event, where they can also bid. And, you know, maybe we would start the auction online a couple days before the event, just to kind of, you know, get people to see the items, let people who can't attend bid on things. You know, I've seen it done a couple different ways, so I definitely think that the auction will be done online and with mobile bidding going forward in some capacity.
Yeah, I think another thing is probably maximizing the support of our host committee online, virtually before the event in person. So definitely, Christina mentioned that we have a host committee planning meeting, but we've never actually hosted that meeting virtually at all. And so there are ways that we can host that meeting in the future online beforehand. And also ask them to, you know, like the videos and submit videos, you know, just using more of these platforms moving forward.
So one more question is, how were tickets used for entry to the event, if at all? So
Christina, yeah.
for our virtual event, we did not use tickets. None of it was actually live. I was actually recently at an event this weekend, a virtual event this weekend, where it was live. They actually took like a 2-hour window to have, you know, an actual event like this, you know, and they had different speakers and performances, and they did an ask and that sort of thing. And so you had to register to be a part of that event. For ours, it wasn't like that. It was sort of just lots of pre-recorded videos that we shared throughout the week. There was the happy hour, virtual happy hour, which was also like this, a Zoom meeting. You just kind of needed the link to go to, but there wasn't an event where we all got together like this. It was just watching the videos, participating in the silent auction, and that sort of thing. I don't know if that answers your question about that. Oh, and so we have some other comments also saying they really liked our community music playlist. It was fun. It really, really was fun. The DJ set wasn't live. Yeah, actually that was live, right? The DJ set. So there was a virtual happy hour and then the DJ set. Oh, it's all blurring together now. I can't remember how it all happened. How did it happen?
So it was live for 4 hours. The DJ played for 4 hours live. The first night, that was like the kickoff, and the host committee person, volunteer, they hosted a virtual happy hour for like 1 hour, starting at 4, leading up to the live DJ set, so that people could, you know, like, here's the link to the DJ set. And then what ended up happening was we pretty much stayed on that virtual happy hour until 9 p.m. So like from 4 to 9, we kept moving from Zoom room to Zoom room to Zoom room. So it turned out to be fun overall, but it was live for 4 hours.
So that was like the unofficial Seeds of Change party, but
yeah. For the host committee.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to join the host committee, they have a lot of fun. Any other questions before we finalize?
I don't think so. Sarah Beth posted some information about Facebook ads. So that's helpful. Thank you. So Robbie wants to know, any challenges with sponsor benefits, or were they mostly supportive of Shift?
All of our sponsors were supportive when we told them we were moving virtual, and primarily the language that I was using with sponsors, and I recommend this for you to get sponsors between now moving forward, is really that this is an opportunity for your community to see who is supporting you and who has your back in this moment. And so if these are sponsors that you normally reach out to in the past, it's good for you to say, for you to still reach out and solicit them for a sponsorship, and, you know, tell them that you're trying to make their supporters visible. And so that's how they responded.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I think that will be it. We are going to share a couple of resources in a post webinar email that we will be sending out tomorrow. And it will include Sarah Best's the Fundraising Despite Disruption blog. It's also going to include some information about bidding for good. We're not necessarily telling you should go with any of these, but we recommend them. And if you have any questions for any of us, you know, Silent Auction, Christina, Ed, Communications, feel free to reach out.
Silent Auction, Katie.
Katie, sorry, and they'll reach out. Their emails will be included in that post-webinar email if you want to reach out and you have additional questions. So we want to thank you all for joining us today.